In today's video, we're going to replace the caliper on this vehicle. This is a 2007 Ford Freestar. It has a caliper with a dual piston in it. Very common system, a lot of vehicles. I'm going to show you how seized this is. As you can tell, the vehicle is jacked up. And it's in park, but it should move back and forth easily. You can tell by the fact that I have to use this bar. That is really stuck, really sticky. It was so sticky that what put me on to the fact that it was effective is that not only the scraping noise that it was making, but when I parked the vehicle, I could smell something burning, and that was the rotor overheating. I'm going to show you how easily the wheels should move in this scenario. This caliper is fine in the rear, but I've got it jacked up because I'm going to change brake pads on it. That's the way it should turn. First thing you want to do in this process is find your brake fluid reservoir, which here is a little tight to get at, and take the cap off of it because we're going to be driving that back into the piston in the caliper, back into the caliper, which will raise the brake fluid level back here. And I'm going to mention right now before I forget this, keep an eye on this level. If you have a tight spot like this, use a turkey baster. We don't want this level in here going below the minimum, because if it goes below minimum, we may have to bleed the brakes, which we will do at the end of this video. We may have to bleed them in the other wheels. Here's our new caliper. This was $105 in Canada, November 2022. That's with the cord charge. In other words, once we replace this one, we're going to take the old caliper back. Anyway, I'm not going to get into ripping that apart. We'll see it as we go. Here is the caliper itself. This is the mounting bracket with a big 18mm bolt here on the top and another one on the bottom. Now these can be very tight. As a matter of fact, I just tried to loosen it with a big ratchet and a little leverage on it. So normally we could take these two bolts out and then pound the caliper back this way, and then we'd be ready to put our new caliper on, which, as you can see, has the bolt holes to go. The bracket is included in this. Anyway, because I need extra leverage, I'm going to just remove the caliper. There's only two bolts here. I wasn't going to show you this, but I thought, well, no harm in a little extra knowledge. So we got our two bolts, one here and one down here with the slider pins. So I'm just going to take those two bolts off, move this out of the way, and then I'll have lots of room to get in there to our caliper mounting bolts. So you set your ratchet counterclockwise, lefty-loosey. This is 12mm in this case, and loosen off our bolts for, show you this one down the bottom, for our slider pins. I cheated a little bit, made sure they were loose before I did this. So we'll take those out, and you will see that we can get the whole caliper out of the way, and then we'll have access for those big mounting bolts that are kind of a pain there. So if you run into an issue like this, that's one way to deal with it. We'll either hang this aside of the tie wrap. In a moment I'll lay it there, but I'll move this out here so it doesn't drop and damage the brake flex hose, which is right there. And that is tight. Also, I'm not recommending getting leverage using this method. It can slip, not advisable. So there's my disclaimer. Don't do this. Just doing it for the purposes of our replacing a caliper video. There you go. So I'll get that bottom one out as well. Got our two bolts out. And now we'll remove the bracket and the brake pads. We're going to place the new clips that came with your caliper into place, and just look at your old unit and we can see that this clip here and down there on this side, we want the more springy one. So that, and look down here, sorry, over here. Again, we'll see that the springy side here is pointing outwards on either side. I have the clips in place, and now I'm going to put the pads in the caliper. I put a little bit of easy slide there, oops, on them, just on the edges, make it slide in a little bit easier. Place one side, oops, clip came out. And make sure, picture your rotor in here, and this side of the pad is going to be obviously hitting the rotor, so you don't want to put your brake pads in back. I've loosened off the banjo bolt here, which attaches to our old caliper. It's a 13mm bolt in our case. And these will have two copper washers on them, which are included in the new caliper. Now, to keep this from leaking too much altogether, I get an old trick. I stuff a couple of earplugs in there until you can see it leaks quite rapidly. And if you start into a job like I did today, earlier in the day, and then you get sidetracked to something else, you might want to plug it off like this. As you never know, you might think, well, I'm just going to put the other caliper immediately on, and then you get sidetracked. I'm going to stuff these in there. I think I can get 3 in, and then I'm going to put my lace grips on it. I'll show you that in a second. So get your 2 mounting bolts handy. You might notice over there our vice grips are holding that flex hose pretty good, keeping that from leaking. Slide your caliper into place. Put your mounting bolts in. I also took a wire brush and gave this a good cleaning around the where the bolts go in here. If you happen to have a Haynes manual for your vehicle or something like that, check the specifications for these bolts. These go pretty tight. Well, you saw how hard it was to get them off. Anyway, I'm not going to make you watch me do that. Tighten those bolts up. So, the last thing I'm going to do here for the evening is connect our bleeder brake flex hose down here to the bottom, and I got those caliper mounting bolts tightened up. And when you do that for something that's really tight like that, just go tighten up one, tighten the bottom one up a bit, and go back and forth like that. Anyway, I would stop now. As you can see, it's gotten dark, but I don't want to let this slowly bleed out overnight. I'm on a real roll here today because I lost my fancy new copper washers. But you're not going to do that. You're not going to be silly enough to lose them. So you'll be putting your nice new washers on there. We're going to put one on either side of the bolt. And I'm just going to stop here. I'm going to get my screwdriver. I'm going to make good and sure that there is no earplug or remnants left in there. I'm going to put one copper washer on this side of the banjo bolt. Really hoping this comes out. And through the end of our hose, and then the other one on that side of the bolt. And tomorrow morning when we go to bleed the brakes, which is the last part of this process, I'm gonna have a look. I'll dry this all up and we'll make sure that there's no leaks. This is not going to be ridiculously tight because of the copper washers. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. You can't see anything anyway. It's the following day. I had put this container underneath our brake line here where we tightened it up. No brake fluid in it overnight, but that doesn't tell us a whole lot. That's just there's not an obvious leak. We're going to find out when we put the pressure on the system and bleed the brakes. So what I've got set up here is a bottle with brake fluid in it. This clear plastic hose goes down below the level of the brake fluid and goes over our bleeder valve. This is 3/16 inch internal diameter. Very tight, but that's what you want. I've also put a little bit of this old brake slider grease between the caliper and the bleeder valve. Kind of don't really need that, but I put that on there sometimes just to make sure I don't introduce any air into the system. So you see, I'm going to go counterclockwise here and loosen up this bleeder valve just a bit. And now, oh, my bottle is moving here. What I'm going to go do is pump the brakes, and you should see air come out of here, and then the brake fluid. As the brake fluid from the master cylinder reservoir comes down as I pump the brake and fills this. And this system will keep air from being introduced into, there we go, well, that's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna go pump the brake and we'll see what happens. Okay, so I didn't observe that, but you did, so it looks like the line is full of fluid. So what I usually do is I'll tighten it back up a little bit, pump it a bunch of times in case there is air still in there, force it to the top of the caliper and out here. I pump the brakes again, keeping pressure on the pedal and just going like that, trying to force any air at all, put the pressure on it so that the air would bubble up. Anyway, let's crack it here. And I'll go give it a couple of more pumps. Hopefully we don't see any air. Well, if we see air, then we... Oops, my bottle is moving on me here. Shoot. Okay, there's a few bubbles. Let's see what we got here. And once you release the brake, now with the new caliper on it, you can see I can turn that easily, just with my hands. Before we had to use that big pry bar. So I was pumping away at those brakes. Released it, caliper releases properly.